Welcome to part 2 of our tutorial aimed at working with databases in MobileTogether. This video will cover the steps required to query and view an individual record from a database, set up both actions and action groups, and finally save changes made to a record. We will build on the project constructed in the first tutorial. If you haven't gone through the first database tutorial or the MobileTogether Designer overview, I would highly encourage you to watch both before proceeding with this video. Links to each will be in the description below. Start by loading the project from the previous tutorial. I have included a link to this in the description if you do not have a copy of it already. Our primary goal is to create a subpage that will show the contents of an individual record to the user. This subpage will allow users to edit and save an individual record. Create a new subpage by clicking on the green plus arrow in the Pages pane and selecting Add Subpage. Change the name to Edit Book. This creates a new blank subpage that we will come back to shortly. For now, select Main Page to return to editing the full view. We want to modify the main page to allow a user to see the full record when clicking or tapping on any label or image. We will accomplish this with the use of actions. The action we will be configuring will need to write the ID of the record the user selects to a persistent element, open the Edit Book subpage, and then reload the book's data source once modifications have been made. Let's start by creating an element to write the ID to be edited to. Right-click on the root element of the persistent data source and select Add Child, then Element. Name this new element Edit Book ID. This creates a new persistent global element which we can use to pass information between pages. Right-click on the new element and select Ensure Always Exists on Load. Now it's time to provide the users with the way to access the subpage. We will do this by assigning actions to each of the controls on the main page. Right-click on the title label in the upper left cell and select Control Actions for on label clicked. Remember that we need a click to perform 3 actions. It needs to take the ID from the current row and assign it to our global element, open the Edit Book subpage, and reload the book's data source once the subpage is closed. To assign the ID, drag the Update Nodes action to the workspace on the right. Update Nodes takes 2 parameters. The first is an XPath expression defining the element we want to write to, and the second is an expression defining where the data should come from. Click on the first XPath button to open the expression editor. We want this action to update our global variable. You can either type the full path to this variable or easily add the path by expanding the persistent data source, expanding root, and double-clicking on the Edit Book ID element. This will build an XPath expression referencing the Edit Book ID element. Click OK, and then click the XPath button on the second line. This opens another expression editor where we would define the data source. Double-click on the ID element in the book's data source. This will create a relative path to the ID contained within the current XML context. Click OK to close the editor. Next, we'll set up an action to go to the Edit Book subpage. Drag the Go To subpage action below the Update Nodes action you just created and select the Edit Book subpage. Finally, we need the app to reload the book's data source. This is done in case there were any changes made to a record. Drag a Reload action below the Go To subpage action and select the book's data source. Using this method to create an action, we would need to duplicate this work for each of the controls on the page, 12 times in total. Doing this would be time-consuming and would also be difficult to manage down the road as any changes would need to be replicated for each label. This problem is solved with the use of action groups. Action groups allow developers to group actions together so that they can easily be assigned to additional controls and managed in a single place. This is similar to using functions and methods in traditional programming languages. You can convert the 3 actions you've set up to an action group by selecting them with the Shift or Control key. Right-click on them and select Create Action Group from Selection. Name this new action group Edit Existing Book and click OK. This will convert the on-click action selected to an action group. Click OK to close the Actions dialog. Adding this new action group to the remainder of the controls is quite simple. Right-click on the title label and select Copy. Select all cells in the table, including the image, right-click on one of them and select Paste Actions. This will apply all actions in the title cell, in this case our action group, to each of the cells in the table. Each control should now have a lightning bolt signifying that an action has been assigned to it. You will notice all the text in the table is now underlined. Let's remove the underlines by selecting all the cells in the table. Select the top left cell, hold the Shift key, and select the bottom right cell. Set the underlined text property to false, and all the underlines will disappear. Run the simulator and click on a control. You will be redirected to a blank page. Additionally, you can expand the persistent data source on the right and confirm that the Edit Book ID element contains the ID of the book you've selected. Go ahead and close the simulator. Now it's time to create the first version of the Edit Book subpage. First, we will need to create a data source. The data source will utilize the same database connection as the main page, but rather than pulling an entire table, it will execute a custom SQL query and pull only one record. Click on the green plus sign in the Page Sources pane. Select New DB Structure and click Next. Set the load data value to on every page. This will cause the query to be run each time the page is loaded. Click Finish. The SQL connection dialog will open. Ideally, you will want to reuse an existing connection whenever possible. Because we've already added this to the database elsewhere in the project, a connection will already exist. If it isn't already, select Existing Connections, click on the Books data source, and click Connect. When selecting all records, we previously selected the Books table. Now we only need one record from this data source. Click on the Add Edit Select Statement button to create a new select statement. I will go ahead and start constructing the SQL query to pull a single book. As we get to the conditional statement, we run into a problem. How do we tell the query what our ID is? To do this, we will need to utilize a parameter. SQL parameters in MobileTogether are defined by a colon. Knowing this, we can add :ID to finish the statement. As soon as we do this, you will see a parameter defined in the bottom of this dialog. This is where you will define what data type a parameter should be and where that parameter should come from. Change the data type of this parameter to int, and then click on the XPath cell to open an expression editor. Remember the global element we created? This is where that will be used. Locate the Edit Book ID element in the persistent data source and double-click on it. An XPath statement has been created referencing the global element. Click OK to close the expression editor. Name this new query Single Book and then click Add Select Statement. Select the Single Book SQL query you just built in the Insert Database Options dialog and click OK. Rename the data source to Edit Book. To optimize database transactions, MobileTogether uses the concept of an original row set. This is a copy of the unmodified rows from the database, which is used during save operations to determine which rows have been changed. Utilizing this concept allows MobileTogether to efficiently determine which rows have changed and build database transactions accordingly. To create an original row set for the Edit Books data source, right-click on the data source and click Create Original Row Set. This data source can now be accessed and manipulated in the same way as the full result set used on the main page. Let's go ahead and start adding controls to the page. Create a table containing 2 columns and 7 rows. This table will contain the controls which will display information back to the user. In the left column, create labels containing the name of each of the elements. On the right side, drag each of the elements from the Edit Book data source and set them as edit fields. When dragging over the image element, be sure to use an image control and set the image source data type property to base 64. Select all the cells in the left column and set the text size to small, format to italics, and width to wrap content with the 5-pixel right margin. Select the cells in the right column and set their size to small. The last thing to do with this subpage is to add discard and save buttons. Create a discard button by dragging a button control to the top of the page and set the text to discard. Right-click on the discard button and select Control Actions for On Button Clicked. When the button is clicked, we want to close the subpage and return to the main page. This can be done by dragging the Close Subpage action on the On-Click section on the right. Do this and click OK. Finally, create a Save button by dragging a button control to the left of the discard button. Set the text of this new button to save. Right-click on the new Save button and select Control Actions for On Button Clicked. This button needs to perform 2 actions. It must save the data source and close out the subpage. Drag a Save control to the On-Click section on the right. Within this action, select the Edit Book data source and leave the other columns as default. Next, drag a Close Subpage action below the Save action. In a later tutorial, we will cover data validation and image handling. For now, the app will accept all changes made to this record. Rerun the simulator and click on a label to open the new subpage. Make a change and click Save. Confirm that the appropriate data is now updated and displayed. Click back and then repeat this for a few more rows. Once you're finished, go ahead and close the simulator. This tutorial covered the steps needed to set up action groups, create a data source based on a SQL query using parameters to load, and edit a single record. The next tutorial will cover upload and modification of images within the Edit Book subpage. MobileTogether Designer is a free program that allows anyone to easily create mobile apps for any platform. Visit www.altova.com/mobile and start creating apps today.